The evening sun dipped low over the Montana range, spilling gold across the quiet homestead where Eli Turner, a soft-spoken single father, was finishing his chores behind the weather-worn barn, unaware that trouble had been walking toward him since sunrise, because in the nearby saloon, 4 cowboys with sour whiskey, breath and wounded pride had decided. The quiet man who never looked anyone in the eye needed to be put in his place, especially after he'd won a month's worth of hay in a fair card game that they were too drunk to play straight, and now, as Eli stacked the last bundle beside the wall, he heard footsteps crunching gravel, slow and mocking, followed by the slurred voice of Wade Cormack, the ringleader, saying, "Well, well, if it ain't the silent hero himself." And Eli's heart tightened, not out of fear for himself. He'd taken beatings before, but out of fear for his 8-year-old son, Daniel, who was inside the cabin studying by lantern light, unaware that his father might not walk back through the door, looking the same as he had that morning. Yet, Eli still straightened his shoulders because he'd promised himself long ago that Daniel would never see him bow to cruelty again, though the Cowboys didn't give him time to speak before they shoved him hard against the barn wall, sneering at his patched shirt and worn boots, calling him names he'd heard his whole life. And Eli, gentle, patient, peace-loving Eli, simply said, "I don't want trouble," which only made them laugh harder, their cruelty emboldened by his calm. And Wade reached for the rope hanging from a peg as if he had darker plans. But just as Eli braced for the first blow, a sudden silence fell, heavy enough to make even the drunken cowboys sober for a heartbeat. Because from the line of dark pine trees, beyond the field came a sound like distant thunder, the sound of many hooves moving as one, steady, intentional, echoing through the stillness of the land, and the cowboys turned, squinting, not yet afraid, but uneasy, and then out of the trees emerged shapes, tall, proud, painted for dusk, riding with a unity that spoke of discipline and purpose, Apache warriors, a dozen strong, moving like shadows carved from mountain stone, and at their head rode Chayton, known across the territory as the Eagle Who Watches, a man whose sharp gaze could read malice before a gun was drawn. And as the cowboys scrambled to adjust their hats, muttering curses and excuses, Chayton raised his hand and the riders halted beside Eli, their presence filling the air with something ancient, something unbreakable. And Wade tried to snarl his way through his fear, saying, "This ain't your business," but his voice shook. Because everyone in Montana whispered stories about Apache justice, swift, precise, honorable, and Chayton leaned forward slightly, eyes calm but carrying the weight of storms, and said, "A man tending his land without harming anyone is every warrior's business." And Eli, breath unsteady from the shove he'd taken, found himself frozen in disbelief, because he had met Chayton once months earlier when he'd helped an injured Apache boy who'd collapsed near Eli's cabin, a boy who later revealed himself to be Chayton's younger brother. And though Eli hadn't known his simple kindness had been remembered, here stood the proof, and the cowboys sensed danger now, backing away, stammering half-formed apologies, but the warriors had already dismounted, moving with quiet authority, and Chayton walked up to Eli, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder, saying softly, "Your kindness protected my family. Now we protect yours." And Eli felt something inside him shift, an old loneliness cracking open, yet before he could answer, Wade made one last foolish mistake, drawing his gun in a trembling burst of bravado. But an Apache warrior named Nantan moved faster, striking his wrist and sending the gun skidding across the dirt, while another stepped behind the remaining cowboys to shut down any thought of escape. And Wade, clutching his wrist, glared at Eli as if this humiliation were somehow his fault. But Chayton simply said, "Leave this land and leave this man." And the cowboys didn't need to be told twice. They fled across the pasture, stumbling over their own feet, their pride bleeding faster than their wounds. And once they were gone, the tension drained from Eli's chest all at once, leaving him lightheaded as he whispered, "I didn't expect anyone to come." And Chayton looked toward the cabin where Daniel's lantern flickered through the window and replied, "Your boy deserves a father who comes home safely at dusk." words that struck Eli deeper than any blow those cowboys could have landed. And as the warriors checked the barn for damage and ensured the threat was truly gone, little Daniel opened the cabin door, calling, "Papa," with that tremble only a child's fear can give, and Eli rushed to him, wrapping him close, promising softly that everything was all right, while Daniel stared wide-eyed at the Apache warriors, standing like guardians carved from legend, and Chayton offered a warm nod to the boy before turning to Eli with a final message. "This land remembers kindness, and so do we." And with that, the warriors mounted their horses once more, riding away like echoes carried by the wind until the last hoofbeat faded, leaving Eli standing in the quiet dusk with his son, held close and his heart unexpectedly strengthened, knowing that the world was not as cruel as it had seemed an hour earlier. And as he finally guided Daniel back inside, he glanced toward the dark ridge where the warriors had disappeared, and whispered a silent thanks to the spirits that had crossed their paths, feeling a deep certainty settle in his chest that this was only the beginning of a story far larger than himself. And if you want to follow the rest of this powerful journey, full of courage, justice, brotherhood, and the bond between a quiet father and the warriors who vowed to protect him, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss Chapter 2, where the real storm begins.